$20,000 gold. Yeah, $20,000 per ounce. Nutty idea. Not so nutty, though, according to some. Well, I'm going to tell you the parts that maybe aren't nutty, and we can proceed from there. So, what if gold hit $20,000? Not because of some kind of mania or some kind of gold shortage or Reddit silver squeeze type romp. Just the US government deciding to reset the price, monetize the gold, revalue it the way they did in 1934 with policy. Now, this might seem like a tin hat fringe idea, but we have smart people talking about it. And the mechanism is really not that complicated. The Fed could monetize Treasury gold certificates tomorrow, just like it monetized trillions in treasuries and mortgage-backed securities. That lever exists. Now, if it was pulled, we could see gold revalued to $20,000 or even higher. Now, $20,000, does that get your attention? Well, let's just ignore the crazy idea for a moment. This would not be a rally or some kind of fun-for-all, get-rich ticket for those of us holding gold. This would be more of a monetary reset, probably also an admission that the U.S. debt is not sustainable. The dollar, it's not capable of carrying it. Now, guys like Luke Groman and George Gammon have been talking about this for a while, saying the only way out of the unsustainable debt cycle is to weaken the currency. And in this case, it means setting a higher gold price as a way to do that. And speaking of gold price, let's get a quick shout out to Summit Metals. They have some of the best prices on gold and silver, so they're a great place to find it. SummitMetals.com. Okay, so here's how a gold price revaluation would work. The US government holds around 261.5 million ounces of this stuff, he says as he grabs Canadian gold maple leaf. Well, it also has the ability to issue gold certificates against that gold, which is currently sitting on the balance sheet at $42.22 per ounce. Now, we've talked about that part a few times, but if the Fed revalues gold to say $20,000, something it can legally do, those certificates and that gold would be worth more than $5 trillion. So, neat trick. Takes the current debt of $36.5 trillion up to about $31.5. Now, would the government actually do this? That's the big question. A lot of the hype around the idea focuses on whether it can be done. And it can. The Fed and the Treasury have a tool to do this. When Besant mentioned monetizing U.S. assets, well, the internet pretty quickly tied that comment to the possibility of a gold revaluation. That wasn't just made up. And there is a way to do it. Now, the problem is that doing it would immediately signal that the U.S. doesn't have confidence in its own currency. Now, if you were doing the accounting there, you might have caught that revaluing gold to $20,000 only takes care of a relatively small percentage of the debt, $5 trillion against $36.5. So why even do this? Well, a lot of economists have pointed out that a 120% U.S. debt to GDP ratio is not sustainable. The U.S. GDP is around $30 trillion. Now, a proposed goal would be to bring that down to 70%. Well, now somehow that's workable. And one way to do that is through currency debasement. Make the debt worth less. Just shrink the debt burden. And we'll come back to that part. So revaluing gold to $20,000 an ounce allows the government to improve its balance sheet without issuing new debt, without increasing taxes, without defaulting, but this would clearly be a new policy direction. We'd be admitting the dollar's in trouble, so it's not something that's going to be done lightly. So what would a gold reset mean for those of us holding gold? We'd all be rich, right? Well, the U.S. Treasury would now have $5 trillion in gold on the books. Covered that part. And each of us would have 6 times more in nominal value than we just had the day before. Each of our gold buffaloes would now be worth $20,000. Now, I guess for anyone holding a huge share of their wealth in gold, that overnight 6x would be a pretty fun turn of events. But for that to mean anything, you'd have to sell to realize the gain, or be able to borrow against it or leverage it somehow. They would have to do something. Now, it's easy to say that you would never sell your gold in a situation like that, but I think realistically, if that happened, most people would be pulling profit off the table in one way or another in a one-off gain like that. The other side of that, of course, who would be buying that gold? What are they paying with? So yeah, a reset could be a life-changing event for gold holders as long as the rest of the system allows that value to be realized. So as long as you're able to sell. Now, I don't know that it would. Now, personally, I don't spend a lot of time thinking about gold increasing in value an extra 5x overnight. But this gold revaluation, monetizing the US gold stockpile, it's a popular topic these days. And if you give any attention to the silver hype, well, you know this kind of story is nothing new. You don't have to go far to find people talking about $500 silver. That's not a 6x, that would be a 13x. Kiyosaki just mentioned $3,000 silver. That would be an 80x, I guess 79x today. So the dream is alive out there, but even if we were to see this happen, even if silver or gold hit those numbers, we'd still have the same problem. Who would buy it? Now, the other problem is that even if you wanted to sell your gold, you have to wonder what you're getting in return. What would the dollar actually be worth at that point? Now, on the upside, the dollar's value is not pegged to gold at this point. So revaluing gold to $20,000 doesn't mean the dollar instantly loses 5/6 of its value overnight, but it would mean there's an extra $5 trillion in new money in play, and those dollars, they just weren't there before, and they're not there now with new treasuries or tax revenue. They're just imagined into existence. Now add to that this bigger implication that the government would now be admitting the dollar can't sustain the current level of debt. That message, it just signals to other central banks that maybe gold is a safer bet, the real reserve asset. Now you can say that, hey, that's no big change because that shift away from the dollar has already been happening, but no. The minute the US shows that kind of confidence in and that kind of reliance on gold, everyone's going to take note. It's no longer a case of maybe. And then domestically, this extra $5 trillion will find its way into the U.S. economy. Maybe you thought this was just a responsible accounting move, just paying down some debt. Well, you heard Scott Bessent talking about monetizing assets on the balance sheet. And you know this administration's strategy is not to slow down and save money. So we get this newly created $5 trillion. It starts circulating, giving people more to spend. The assets get bid up, prices rise. We also get inflation. And we know where that leads. That means higher interest rates to fight that inflation, which brings us right back to the original problem the government would be trying to fix. So kind of a no-win situation. There's always a catch. So yeah, fun idea. The government monetizes U.S. gold holdings, resets the price for all of us, sextuples up some gold bugs, injects a few extra $1 trillion into the system, and magically fixes the debt problem, at least for a few days. Nobody actually gets bailed out in this situation. Maybe a gold bug or two get a Lambo, and these 10th ounce coins being $2,000, yeah, that would be fun. But this monetization or revaluation or reset, as it's being called, it's more like a reboot that just reintroduces the original issue once everything cycles through. Now, George Gammon made a video or two about this idea. He gave a $20,000 gold revaluation something like a 10% chance in one of his videos. Now, I would say it's probably lower than that, but a lot of the potential ramifications that would come from the U.S. admitting a lack of confidence in the dollar are happening even without that admission. We've seen gold demand increase as it's being used more and more as a reserve asset. That's already pushing the price up. So we might not be getting the overnight reset that some people are out there dreaming of, but like always, I would say be careful what you wish for. So let's call it good there. Let us know what you think of the U.S. monetizing its gold holdings. Do you think there's anything to this idea of the Fed making a bid for $20,000 gold? People are telling us this is not a fringe idea. It's usually people who are on the fringe telling us that. I'm not so sure. I think it's pretty far out there, but let us know what you think. And then while you're in the comments, be sure to hit that like button if you found any of this interesting. Be sure you're subscribed with notifications turned on if you want to hear more on the topic. And if you're still here, thanks again for watching. I always appreciate your time. Take care.